What I'm sharing this morning is based on a reflection from one of my books on Mark's Gospel, but padded out a bit for our purposes this morning. So the parable of the sower, a very familiar passage, but one that we come to again today. We hear the words of Jesus to the people of his time, and we hear what that might say to us today. So today the talk is of sowing, a picture that many of us are familiar with. But I guess if you're not a farmer or a gardener, it might not make much sense. But Jesus reminds us about the familiar pattern. You walk along, you dip your hand in the bag of seed and you scatter it as you go. The seed goes everywhere, on the path, on the rocky ground, in the thorns, and some of it even made the soil. Each of those landings has predictable results. The birds sweep down to eat what they could, a nice free and easy meal. Some of the seed grew well, but without deep enough roots, so it soon withered away. Some were choked by the stronger, more established plants, and some of it grew healthy, strong and productive. All very usual, all part of the life of growing seeds. But Jesus is telling us something else in all this. What amazes me when I stop and think about it is that anyone bothers to sow seeds at all. It's such a risky and precarious business. We often have the conversation in our household about what seeds have disappeared or haven't grown and what plants have withered up and died. Sowing has a relatively small success rate, an unpredictable return for all the work. So much potential heartache for the ones that do not make it. Yet if you do not sow at all, there will definitely be no return. So the sower sows, knowing that some seed will not make it, doesn't put off the sowing. If we sit and think of the risks versus the rewards, we probably wouldn't bother to buy seeds, but we do. The birds are always digging up seeds and plants in our garden, which is great for the birds, not so good for the plants. If we watch the tractor sowing which we can from our garden, the birds follow behind, swooping down on the seeds as it lands. Yet still the farmer sows, because the harvest will come despite that. It can be easy to become disillusioned about the seeds that we plant. We want to see a bigger reward for our work and the cost, whether they grow or not. Yet the flowers that do make it are worth it. This is a photo of the flowers in our garden last week that show, despite all our moaning, some of them did grow. But this cautionary tale that Jesus brings us is about more than gardening or mass horticulture. Jesus is asking me today to think about sowing, not particularly about flowers and crops, but sowing God's love, hope, and peace as I journey through my life. So as we reflect on this very familiar passage, God asks me to think about scattering what I know of him and his love for others wherever I go and to whoever I meet. It can be easy to be disillusioned about that, though. Will what I say or do fall on deaf ears? Will it land on barren ground? Will it appear to shoot, then wither and die? Will it seem as though someone has got it, only for them to become quickly disillusioned? Will they just not notice what I'm doing or saying, or not be bothered? Perhaps it makes me question whether it's worth it, the rewards and the hazards. Should I even bother? Or am I wasting my time to share what I know about God with other people? The parable of the sower would suggest yes. Just get on with it. Still, we are called to sow as we go and as we live, because if we don't sow, there will never be any harvest. God's love and hope are always worth spreading liberally, without worrying about what will happen to them afterwards. God can worry about that, or not. We don't need to. So perhaps this parable, God is encouraging me to just get on and do it, to be part of the creative, growing process. To join in God's work is the invitation. This parable is an encouragement not to worry about what will happen to the seed, so much as just getting on with the sowing and letting God take care of the rest. But there is another side to this parable. As well as looking at the response of others to God's seeds in their lives, perhaps God is asking me to think about what kind of response I make to what God has sown in my life. God is looking at my growth too. Much as I am watching the seeds I have planted, is my focus on everyone else, or do I take time to look at myself? Can I look at the growth in my life? How is what God has given me growing? God sows in abundance in our own lives too. But how deaf are my ears? How barren my ground? How easily do I let seeds be snatched away? How often do I let the heat of my life wilt what God has given me? Or do I nurture it and care for it as carefully as I would my favourite plant? Will I allow God to sow generously, to cultivate tenderly, and to bring to harvest what God has sown in me? God is certainly asking me to listen, to hear what God is saying to me, and to do something about it, to join with God in the seed sowing journey of growth and life, a journey we are all invited on, to sow with God and to share all that we know about Him generously wherever we go. Lord, seeds are such precarious things, a risk of not knowing what will happen, but such a blessing when they grow. Help me, Lord, to be willing to take the risk for the growth of others and your kingdom, to sow liberally of all you have to offer, to keep on sowing for the seed that will grow, multiply, produce fruit and beauty. But as I do so, may I also keep an eye on the seed in my own life and how they are growing and tend them with you. Amen.